The NFL season is a quarter of the way done. College football is in full swing. Scouts are filling up their big boards, so why don't we dive into our first mock draft in today's special edition of Best Available. Really excited to dive into our 1.0 mock draft. If you know me, you know I am a huge draft fan, so if you are as well, consider subscribing to the channel. If you want an even deeper look into the way I grade my prospects, all of my notes, rankings, everything like that, consider becoming a member to the channel. I'll post a description in the episode, but I know why you're here, so why don't we go ahead and dive into the mock draft. So excited to be doing this one. I've truthfully never done a mock draft in video format through my 13 years of dissecting the draft as an analyst. It's always been written, so I've always had plenty of time. So be a really interesting attempt to do this in real time. So why don't we go ahead and dive into it? The New York Jets are on the clock, and I know, I'm going to use some of the needs here because Pro Football Focus does do a good job. Shout out to Trevor Sikkema. I think they do a really good job with their draft content, but I'm also going to use my grades. So you can see them here. I will be flipping back and forth at times when I want to talk about a prospect a little more in detail. Again, if you want full access to this big board with my rankings so far, we've got something like 50 guys on this board. All of that, again, consider becoming a member. The description is the details are in the description. So Jets are on the clock. There's all kinds of moves we can make, but I'm going with a quarterback. I think, the offensive line has a couple really talented young players. I think the defense has enough pieces. You have this number one receiver in Garrett Wilson. So going quarterback, my top ranked quarterback right now is Dante Moore. Maybe he's not the best athletic tools. I think they're good. There's a lot of things, but the thing that stands out to me that why he's my QB1 is just unflappable. That Penn State game in that whiteout just didn't look, stressed at all. Really stood out to me. So he's going to be my number one pick. That could change. This quarterback class is so weird and honestly, frankly, disappointing. So I'm very curious to see, how this quarterback class ends up stacking up by April. So a lot of time for that. We got Cleveland next, and obviously they have a whole ton of moves. I've considered doing a trade in here. We might have a trade later in this show. I'm really torn there, but I think for now I just have to go best player available. And it is Rueben Jr. And you're thinking, Tyler, their whole strength is their defensive front and everything else is a mess. I get it, man. It's bad, but do the Browns really want to swing on a quarterback, especially if one's already gone and this class is questionable? Is there an offensive lineman worth the second overall pick? I like a couple of the guys, but Rueben Bain's my number one prospect. I think he's too talented. Myles Garrett's not going to play forever, but pairing Bain and Myles Garrett on a defensive front, I don't think you have to worry about that side of the football for a long time, or at least that unit on the defense. I just think it's too tempting of a move to pass up on. So I'm taking Bain. You can be angry, but we're going to have some fun with this. I'm just trying to go off my grades, just what I think. I'm not trying so much to think of what they would do, but we're going to have a couple instances of that. I think it's just unavoidable. But this is my mock draft. We're just going to wing it. Number 3, Baltimore Ravens. I've got a hot take for you here. I've got a real hot one. Carnell Tate, the wide receiver. He is my number 1 ranked wide receiver. I know Jordan Tyson's getting a lot of love, and I think he's a phenomenal player too. I think he's borderline top 10 on my board. Let's check real quick. He is number 10, but Carnell Tate's number 5. He is a 6'3", sub 200-pound guy that just moves different for the position. He's physical at the catch point. He has such reliable hands. He's a phenomenal route runner. There are questions about his play speed, but I think it's definitely fine enough. I think he's a winner at all 3 phases of the game. This is my favorite receiver I've watched so far. So the Ravens have all kinds of needs, but I really think this guy that could become a number 1 weapon, listen, I love Zay Flowers. I love the tight ends. You need a guy. This is a different kind of cat than what they have, and I really think it could do a lot to unlock the passing game for Baltimore. So give me Carnell Tate at number 3. Top 3 pick for this guy. Ohio State just keeps cranking him out. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to admit it. If he's an Ohio State wide receiver, he's probably going to be awesome in the NFL. I think it's just a rule at this point. Miami Dolphins. Boy, do they have a lot of needs. Really struggled here as far as what to take, but again, if we're just going best player available on a team that has so many needs, I think it's got to be Caleb Downs. This is such a versatile playmaker on the back end of your defense. I think it's going to be a really, really necessary move to just add really good players. I considered quarterback here. There's just the franchise is in such disarray right now. I think you're going to see some big changes, but Caleb Downs is one of the best players in this draft. They have an opportunity to take him. I think they go there here. Here's where I'm probably going to steer off of my rankings. The New Orleans Saints have Garrett Nussmeier's dad on their coaching staff. So I'm sorry. They have him ranked 45. I think I have him in my, hold on, where is he? 20. And I really like Nussmeier. I think he throws with better anticipation than anyone. I think he understands operations pre and post snap. Like, this is the smartest quarterback in this class. The lack of physical tools are a real problem. And it's really starting to show up. And maybe you can argue he doesn't have the best weapons on this offense. There's a lot of concerns about that. The Saints will draft him. I'm convinced that this is going to happen already. I know they took a quarterback last draft with Tyler Shuck, but the Nussmeier connection with that coaching staff makes me feel a little icky. I think they should go best player available, but this is just how the NFL works sometimes. I just can't unsee this happening. So I'm taking Nussmeier. I don't love it, but that's where I'm going. And we're going to go to another quarterback here. The Geno Smith project is going horrible, and maybe this changes. Maybe Geno turns it around by the end of the season, and we look at this pick completely differently. But as of right now, you've got this really exciting running back in the backfield. You've got to work on that offensive line. I considered offensive line here. But I think they go quarterback as well because they just need to reset this franchise. And Fernando Mendoza has been playing lights out. I'm an IU grad. I still can't believe this run the last 2 years is real. Anytime anyone asks me about it, I think it's just a fever dream. But Mendoza, I thought Rourke was solid. Mendoza has just taken that to a whole new level. Really quick release, can layer throws. His ability against cover 2 to hit the hole on the sideline between the safety and the corner. He makes some throws that just blow me away, especially like when he's getting hit. So I don't think he's the perfect prospect. He's kind of a statue. More of a goofy runner, I guess. He's got some athletic ability, but it's just goofy. All of that to say, though, I think he is going to be a top 10 pick with the way the season's going and his traits, physical tools. He's a big guy. Really curious to see where he ends up. But I think as of right now, with the way Geno Smith's playing, I think the Raiders go take a swing at quarterback. Tennessee Titans. We could go anywhere here, but you picked Cam Ward number 1 overall this past draft. I think you got to protect him. So the first offensive lineman's going to go off the board. And Spencer Fano. This is a guy that reminds me a lot of David Bakhtiari, but on the right side. Kind of an undersized tackle, but he plays with really quick feet, super agile. He's got good pad level. He's got a lot of boxes that check for me that I think he could play on the left side. I really don't care where you play him. I just think he's a really good, technically sound, and athletically gifted offensive lineman. Just checks a lot of boxes for me, so I am going to get him off the board, and we're going to double dip on offensive line here with the Giants. Another team that seems like they've found their franchise guy. They probably feel a lot more confident right now than Tennessee does with how that's been going, but a huge win for Jackson Dart and the Giants on Thursday Night Football. I don't believe this draft order is updated. It is not, but that's fine. We'll just roll with it from Thursday night. Huge win for the Giants, but at the end of the day, the offensive line, I think the tackles are pretty solid, but Francis Maui Noah, pronunciations are not going to be my strong suit on this mock. Absolutely love this kid. That's a kid that can be a kick-ass guard or a right tackle. Some of the best run blocking I've seen on tape so far from this tackle class. He plays with really good pad level and is mean about it and drives his legs through contact. Like, that is a guy that can open up a lot. I love the idea of him blocking for Cam Scadaboo and protecting Jackson Dart. That is one of my favorite fits I think I could consider in this draft. So really, really intrigued by that one. Over to the Bengals. I think they still need a defensive line need. I just think any defensive help right now. I know the offensive line's a mess, but we have 2 that go off the board early. I don't know if there's any guys. I haven't watched a ton of the rest of the offensive line group. I actually have. A few tackles, a couple interior guys, but no one I'd pick top 10. It's got to be Peter Woods. Trey Hendrickson is locked up for a little bit, but having another interior pressure guy, Woods, is something else, man. We can look at the board again real quick. We've got Woods number 3 overall. I'm just so impressed by the athlete, but also the technique. Him and Parker, the Clemson edge, who I'm sure we'll have drafted here shortly, just very technically refined players. who are also athletically gifted. So I think this is a no-brainer for the Bengals to get, a top-tier defensive player to add to that defensive front, because, boy, they need it against the run. They need it against the pass. I think this is a team that you realize how much Joe Burrow has been propping up a really flawed roster. So I think just getting any good player in general is going to be worthwhile for them. Speaking of Clemson, we'll just go TJ Parker right here as well. I want a pass rusher in Carolina. I want something reliable. I see wide receivers in need, but with Coker and Leggett and Tate McMillan, I feel pretty good about that wide receiver room, and maybe Bryce Young's going to turn it around the rest of the year. I'm a little concerned at the QB position, but can't imagine them going early. But I just like Parker on the edge. You're getting a Carolina guy in Carolina. There's a lot of things I like about this pick, but that's another guy that, maybe not the bendiest or anything like that, but man, is that a technically sound power rusher with great hand usage. A lot I really like about him. We'll go ahead and get the running back off of the board with Houston. Clear running back need. Nick Chubb is playing really well, but how long is that going to last with his injury history and age and workload? I think Jeremiah Love in that backfield with CJ Stroud's really exciting. Boy, do they need to figure out that offensive line. It feels like anytime they find a starter, they just trade him away. I don't know what that strategy is right now, but take Love, figure out the offensive line this offseason, though. If there was another guy I felt really, really high on, I'd probably take him 11, but Jeremiah Love is just a unique. I think that's the best way to say he's a unique athlete at the running back position. We always talk about contact balance and stuff like that. This man can jump over anyone, and it's, I think, not the most valuable trait, but it's just an example of just how athletic he is. He's a big-bodied back. There's a lot he does I really like at the running back position. I think he can be a franchise player. So I think that's a pretty no-brainer. As far as like the most likely spot for Love in the first round, Houston just makes too much sense. With the Arizona Cardinals, another team that can go in a lot of different directions, but let's go with Arvell Reese out of Ohio State. I love this linebacker. I think by the time April comes around, you will hear Arvell Reese's name a lot like that you heard Jalen Walker out of Georgia last season. This really unique edge linebacker hybrid, freaky athleticism, length, competitiveness. I think he's still working on his post-snap processing. I think he's a tick slow still. I think that just comes with, more reps, more experience, but every game he plays, he's making a couple splash plays. You can see the talent just fly off the screen. Really, really excited about Arvell Reese and what he can do. So very curious to see where he ends up, but I think Arizona is a very logical fit. We're moving on to Dallas. Have a few needs. We're going to go with edge. You got to replace Micah Parsons at some point, even if you don't want to admit that you need to. But Keldrick Falk is this guy. I think I have pretty high on him. Yeah, number 4 overall prospect. He's 6'6", 285. What blows me away for a guy that's so athletically gifted is he really does want to engage blockers with good technique and pad level. He can be a run stopper. He knows how to set up different pass rush moves, like just this really unique blend of size, strength, and technique that makes him kind of a unicorn at the position. I think that run stopping prowess will also be appealing to Dallas. They're very on record about wanting to stop the run. I just think that's a really nice fit. I think they're thrilled if Falk falls to them at 13. The Rams are going to have a couple picks here, and I was really tempted to take a quarterback early. I'm really tempted to take a quarterback early, but I just have to take best player available here. And for me on my board, I think it's Mansour Delane. Maybe Tyson has an edge above him, but cornerback is a need, and Delane is just one of these guys. I loved him at Virginia Tech. I was really intrigued. I thought he was going to go pro last year out of Virginia Tech, but here he is in LSU just dominating, a really sticky, aggressive, tenacious corner who has the processing to, figure out how to trade off routes, read the QB's eyes. He can play man or zone. This is one of my favorite players I've watched in this draft class. So I think that is a really, really nice fit for a really young defense that now gets an impact corner that's also young. It's one of my favorite units in football is that young Rams defense. Is it perfect? Of course not. But a lot of the players they have are, if they're all starting to ascend at the right time, make that a very dangerous defense. With the Kansas City Chiefs, I think it's it for Travis Kelce. I think he's playing pretty well. I was a little worried earlier in the year. He's getting leaned on a little more heavily the last few weeks. But I don't think he plays after this year. I just think he's accomplished everything I think he set out to do in his NFL career. He's one of the best tight ends in NFL history. I think his time's done, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for Kansas City to take his successor in Kenyon Sadiq. Not a guy that's a true inline guy, but he can do some of that. But he is a unique, power slot, wing, one of these move tight ends, move F tight ends. That's just a genuine athlete and is just so exciting after the catch. I think he's the perfect replacement for Kelce in that offense. Makes that a really, really fun team. So if Kelce stays, I imagine maybe the Chiefs still make this move if he's here. I just can't shake it out of my head. I just think it's too perfect of a situation for the Chiefs to not pull the trigger on, an extremely talented tight end prospect. With the Bears, I think they just need to keep building out in the trenches. I know running back's a concern if Jeremiah Love's off the board. I haven't watched enough of the rest of the running back class to have an opinion on if anyone else is a first-round pick, but I highly doubt it. I've heard good things about Ahmad Hardy, but I've also been told he's not draft eligible. A lot going on, but let's take Caleb Banks and pair him with another Florida Gator in Gervin Dexter. Just a massive, imposing human being. Watch some of his tape. I'm impressed by the athletic tools. Obviously, the injuries that keep piling up this season have not helped, but I feel like when this guy is on, he is a game wrecker in the middle of a defense, and I think pairing him with Dexter gives the Bears kind of what they're missing in the trenches, and I think that's a really fun pick for the Bears that makes them definitely a lot better up front and helps the rest of the secondary because, hey, next year when that secondary is healthy, that defense is a good defense. It is a talented defense. I think adding an interior presence like Banks unlocks a lot for the rest of that team. So very interested in that. I know I'm a Packers fan. I know I got Packers jerseys back here. I'm not going to give the Bears a bad pick out of spite. That's just not how I operate. The Commanders, I think I'm going to go outside of their team needs by PFF, and I'm going to take Jordan Tyson. I think he's the perfect complementary receiver to Terry McLaurin and Debo. You got slot, and then you've got Z, and then I think Tyson can be that X that can, push vertically, be a chuck it up, throw it up to him. He's going to come away with it kind of player. I think it's such a perfect complement to the other two weapons that I don't care that, it's not their biggest need. I think he is a top 10 player on my board. I think it's a great fit. I think he's slipping a little bit in this draft, and I can't not have him fall any further. I think it's a huge win for the Commanders, and Jaden Daniels is jumping up and down, thrilled with that selection. The Los Angeles Rams. We're going to go quarterback, and I'm curious where their grades are. Simpson, I've still not got to. I've only watched in passing, and I've heard everything's good about him. Mateer's a fun one. Here's where I'm torn. Sean McVay could really want just like a Kyle Shanahan guy where it's plankton operating the brain. Like, I don't want him to go off script. I just want him to make the play and be a robot. Like, make the read, throw the ball. He also might want just a physical, talented guy that he can have sit behind Matthew Stafford and learn and not be thrust into the starting lineup early. And if that's the case, and I want that to be the case with Sean McVay, I love Lenore Sellers. I'm going to fall in love with another exciting dual threat QB again, I know. And this year's been really messy, but when it's on for Sellers, man, I think he is, sharper than a lot of people are giving him credit for. I think he really understands coverages and leverages and, placing the ball with anticipation. He's obviously a tremendous running threat. His arm's incredible. Him and Sean McVay would be one of the most exciting pairings at any, quarterback head coach combo. So we could take some of these other guys, but I'm going Sellers. I just think it's too fun of an idea of him working with Sean McVay and not having to rush into the starting lineup as Stafford's career winds down. I'm a huge fan of this pick. I made it, so I got to do what I want. I'm just kidding. Love the Lenore Sellers potential there. So I'm very curious to see. Let me know in the comments who you think McVay would take, if he'd prefer a physical tools guy or more of a just point guard dink and dunk kind of player. Very interested. Let's go with the Patriots. Offensive line still a mess. Will Campbell looks great. I can't remember who, I apologize, but someone released an EPA, or expected points added by rushing direction, for all 32 NFL teams. It was a really, really nice visual. And for the Patriots, the only positive EPA they're generating on rush plays is to the left outside, which is where Will Campbell is. The rest of the team needs work. Let's get them an offensive lineman. Gettings Dunker, I've heard good things about. I've not gotten to yet. I will. He's on the short list of guys I want to watch, but it's an Iowa lineman. I'm going to trust the consensus right now and take him. We'll get to another tackle that's still on the board in a little bit, but I just think adding a guy that can play guard or tackle for you. Just move him around. You need some just competent bodies on this offensive line. Speaking of offensive linemen, we'll have our first interior guy come out here just because it feels like kind of the missing piece on Denver's offensive line right now, this elite offensive line, in my opinion, when everything's going right. And we are going to take Connor Lew, the center out of Auburn. Been playing hurt this year from what I've been told, but, I watched the Baylor game. I was really impressed. I think this is a guy that has, good instincts. If I recall, he's a little undersized. We're going to go to our board. Yeah, 6'3", 303, but I think he's really technically sound. You need, basically a quarterback's mind at center. I think he has that. I think he can be a guy that slots in, learns really quickly. And just because he's not the biggest guy, I think he can make up for that with technique and processing and let, the talented guards in Denver, help him with some of his deficiencies. So I just think this is a really nice fit. I like the pick. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Broncos, who are in a really good situation where they don't have a lot of really glaring needs. But I think at 20, Lew feels like a totally appropriate pick as far as value. The Chargers are in an interesting situation. I want to go line, but I feel like the only lineman left that I really like is a tackle. Maybe not like, but someone with a first-round grade. Khalil Mack might be retiring. I think they need pass rush. My next top-rated pass rusher is R. Mason Thomas out of Oklahoma. Maybe he's a tick undersized, but I think this guy is pound for pound one of the strongest edges in this class. Love the way he plays against the run. I think he showed up really well in that Auburn game where he was suspended the first half. Showed up, made some really clutch plays for them in the second half to help Oklahoma win that game. A lot of really impressive stuff from that team. He's a really fun player. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for him. I think it's gonna be a really fun pick. The Vikings, I've got a hot one for you. I can't believe Harrison Smith is still playing football and still playing at a high level, but we need a safety, I think, as a successor. So we're going to go AJ Halsey. Watched him this week, blown away. 220-pound safety, got some moves. He is patently unafraid. He almost looks excited to help in run support. I love this type of player. Maybe his tackling technique's not the best, but I think he's fluid enough. They really trust him at deep safety. There's a lot I really like about his instincts and processing and understanding what's going on in front of him, ability to close downhill. I think he's a really fun chess piece that fits really well with Brian Flores as this aggressive safety prospect. I think he checks so many boxes, and maybe we can argue if he's a first-round pick, but I think for the Vikings, he's absolutely a first-round talent. So we're going to go AJ Halsey there. A little fun one. Here's an interesting one with the Seahawks. Sounds like they want to move on from Reek Woolen. I still love Devin Witherspoon, but clearly the secondary is going to be a concern if they move on from Woolen. I'm going to take Jermod McCoy, who I know has not played yet this season, but from everything I had heard, this is CB1 when healthy. This is probably enough of a fall for him, so we're going to get him off the board right now. The Seahawks get a potentially really talented cornerback just to keep adding to that secondary. I think the defensive front's rock solid for them right now. I just think they need more help in that secondary. So makes a lot of sense, especially if McCoy has a clean bill of health by the time April comes around. The Cowboys really want to stop the run. Jerry Jones has made sure that we know that 100,000 times since trading away Micah Parsons. So they got an edge with their earlier pick, but with the Packers pick, we are going to add Amari Washington, a 330-pound run-stuffing, gigantic presence in the interior of the Dallas defense. Will be a fun addition. Him and Falk add some real size up in the trenches. I do think if they are serious about wanting to stop the run, while also having a little bit of a pass rush improvement, I think these two picks would help and go an awful long way. Are they Micah Parsons? No. I don't think even the combined forces of those two will add up to a Hall of Fame pass rusher, but that's what they wanted, and they'll have more picks next year. So there you go. I hope they enjoy it. The Steelers will probably take a quarterback. I really think so. Aaron Rodgers is probably done after this year, and they keep just kind of kicking the can with these journeymen. If we go to quarterback, man, it's tough. I still want to get into the Ty Simpson film deeper, but I mean, you look here, just really accurate when I'm not under pressure, really high adjusted completion percentage. 8.1 is still a very good average depth of target in my opinion. There's a lot here I like. as far as, the way he's playing. He's playing some of his best football lately after a shaky start to the season. We'll go Ty Simpson. I don't know how I feel about it. We'll keep going as the season progresses. I'm excited to really dive into his film in the coming weeks. But for now, congrats, Ty Simpson. You are a Steeler. Sneaky hot take I have, though. I think Will Howard can compete for a starting job. And I'm not... I was high on him coming out of the draft. I actually thought he had a lot of tools I liked. I don't think everything was perfect, and I get he had a very talented supporting cast around him at Ohio State, but I don't know. I think there's something about him I think it could be a starter, so I'm very curious to see how that goes next season. We are nearing the end, so let's keep going. Let me figure out a way to move this so we can see the rest of the draft. Here we go, the last few picks remaining. I'll do my best to talk through if you can't see at the top of the big board. Starting right now with the Cleveland Browns, I think wide receiver makes a lot of sense. We're going to go with Mekhi Lemon out of USC, guy that I've been watching the last couple weeks and been really, really impressed with. He is currently my wide receiver 3. It's that elusiveness after the catch. It's the way that he runs routes. There's a lot that he does that I'm a huge fan of, in a, sub 200-pound frame, but he plays a lot tougher than you'd think for a, quote-unquote smaller guy. I just think he's a really fun weapon that fits a lot. Maybe kind of Jerry Jeudy-ish. Maybe it's redundant, but I think he's a really fun player, and they just need weapons in general. Cedric Tillman is really coming out finally, but I think, Lemon's one of these guys that could, be slot or slot outside versatility, a fun weapon for the Browns I think they'd be really happy with. If we're moving on to Tampa Bay, I'll go pass rusher here. I don't think they have, Kalijah Kancey on the interior getting hurt stinks. I know they have some promising ascending players like Yaya Diaby on the edge, but I really think a guy like Cassius Howell, one of these guys that can be a true speed rusher off the edge for Tampa Bay, can really unlock a lot of what this defense is missing, which is some juice at pass rusher. I don't think he's my favorite edge yet, but the flashes I see from him as far as that edge and bend and explosiveness are really impressive. I'm not sure about his length. I have a couple questions, but we're late in the first round. I think it's a worthwhile pick, good value. There's a couple other edges. Maybe if they really want to prioritize length, they can look at one of these Texas Tech kids who, I think are pretty damn talented as well. We'll go Howell for now, and, we'll evaluate later. Again, we're a quarter of the way through the NFL season. It is not over yet. We got plenty of time. For the Lions, they cannot stay healthy at cornerback. I think we need to keep adding bodies there just to make sure they have depth when things go wrong. And to me, Avion Terrell screams Dan Campbell corner. This is a guy, really physical, competitive, can be sticky at times. Maybe he doesn't have the top end physical tools of the average corner in the first round. I think the competitiveness and the way he's wired really fits with what Dan Campbell wants. And I think, he's a really fun pick for that defense. And I think he's a good complementary piece to what they already have in that secondary. So we're going to go Avion Terrell there. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills, we'll also give them a corner. We saw in the playoffs last year how bad things got. I know they still have, they just drafted Maxwell Harrison, but we're going to keep adding bodies to that cornerback room, especially as other guys are getting on the older end of things. And we will go with A.J. Harris, cornerback out of Penn State. Another guy I've only seen briefly in passing, but I've liked what I've seen. He's got good size and length. I think he fits the mold for what they need at corner, so we'll go there. The 49ers might be getting a steal here. I don't know how I feel about it. But Caden Proctor, the Alabama tackle, who is just a giant. We can look here on my tackle rankings. 6'7", 369. That is an outrageous frame, right? Guys should not be that big and still be as athletic. I think he is number 1 or close to it on Feldman's Freaks list this year. The Florida State game was ugly. I think his feet can be plodding at times. I think there's balance issues. I think he relies too much on his size versus technique. A lot of that stuff worries me. But the San Francisco 49ers have had some really, really damn good offensive linemen. I don't know how much longer Trent Williams is going to play, but if he stays around for at least another year, I think he's the perfect mentor for Caden Proctor. I think the 49ers would be absolutely thrilled with this pick, especially if they convince Trent Williams to play at least another year. I just think that is a match made in heaven for a potential successor to Williams eventually on the left side. So big fan of that one. I can't figure out what to do with the Colts. I can't believe that I'm talking about them not having as many needs as I thought. Off-ball linebacker certainly feels like a glaring one. Having that second guy opposite Zaire Franklin is important, but I just don't see the value here at 31. So I'm going to trade and have the Miami Dolphins come in, and I'm not going to mess with trade value. Maybe they get a couple picks. Don't freak out about my trade package. I'm just going to force it. But I do think if the Colts don't see value, there's a lot of quarterbacks and wide receivers on the board. I think they would just trade out for someone that wants a position. So I have the Miami Dolphins trading into the back of the first round. Why? They're going to take John Mateer, the quarterback out of Oklahoma. I think if McDaniel stays, which I feel like that's not going to happen, but yeah, I think there's going to be a regime change of some sort. They're going to want a new quarterback. I just can't see Tua continuing to hold the starting job with how he's played. Mateer is this really fun, competitive, dual threat guy. Throws a little funky. It's not my favorite the way he throws. I think he struggles with catering velocity or tailing it back and forth. But he's a gamer. He's an absolute gamer. I've loved watching him, even if I'm going to be critical at times. I just think he's a really fun football player I'd want on my team. And I think it could, help change and have a new era in Miami. There's a lot of fun stuff I like about him. And then we'll wrap up with the Eagles. I've got no idea what they would want to do. I'm going to give them Denzel Boston. They're one of these teams that's just going to wait and see what falls to them late in the first round. Again, this draft order is not updated as a Thursday night's game, but Denzel Boston is one of these really fun, big-bodied, I'm going to go up and get it. But also, he's a returner. That part blows me away for a guy of his size to be a returner on Washington. So there's a lot to like. I can make myself a little smaller, and we can go through the draft picks here. But Dante Moore, number 1, Ruben Bain to the Browns, Carnell Tate to the Ravens, Caleb Downs to the Dolphins, quarterbacks go 5-6 with Nussmeier to New Orleans, Mendoza to the Raiders, pair of tackles in Spencer Fano and Francis Mauigoa to the Titans and Giants respectively, and then a pair of Clemson players in Peter Woods and TJ Parker to round out the top 10. That is our 1.0 mock draft. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Guys that we might be missing. If I go look at my board real quick, who might we be missing? Just scrolling down really fast. Caleb Lomu, the tackle out of Utah. David Bailey, the edge out of Texas Tech. I like Kristen Miller, the D-line out of Georgia, the other Texas Tech edge, and Romello Height. I'm fascinated by Drew Aller. He seems like he's just plummeting. Things are going horribly. There's a lot that's going to change in the coming weeks, but this is always a fun exercise based off team needs and who's really shining in the college football season. So that's going to do it for Mock Draft 1.0. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. We will try and do these sparingly throughout the season. There's so much other film I love diving into, and we'll be back on Monday with some reactions from the weekend of football. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back later.